What was your father's farm like in Brunswick County?
It was like about 100 acres.
What was on it?
That you did the mules. Didn't have any tractors or anything. Had mules and horses.
You had horses?
Oh yeah, we'd ride horses to drive up the cows. Back then, you had to keep your fields fenced. Not a pasture to put your cows in. The cows and hogs all run loose in the wooded area. So you had to keep your field fenced. And everybody's cows just run out, and they had markings in the air to tell whose cow was who. They had a particular mark they'd put in his air, and I'd ride the horses in the afternoon to drive them cows up and pen them, put them in the pen at night to make fertilizer for the farm, put on the corn, stuff like that.
What did you raise on the farm? Corn and what?
Well, back then was corn and cotton, potatoes, sweet potatoes, a few soybeans, not many soybeans, and then later on I guess it was when I was around 15 or 16, I guess we started growing tobacco.
Is that hard?
Oh yeah, that was terrible. I worked on the farm from the time I was about 3 or 4. Feeding the hogs, slopping the hogs, and driving the cows up, feeding chickens. Had 3 brothers, older than I was. They helped out a lot too. Of course, my sisters, they was 2 or 3 of them was school teachers. After they got large enough to do anything, most of them left home, and there's 3 of them school teachers now, and 1 or 2 of them worked in Wilmington and different places.
How did you farm tobacco?
Back then you had to haul up logs and then put on the ground where you was going to make the plant bed and burn that. And it didn't have any kind of, insecticides or chemicals or anything to kill the weed seed in the soil. And you had to bring your tobacco out of the field in a drag. We made a wooden drag for the mule to pull. And you did all of it by hand with stringing it this way and that way on a stick. And then you hang stick up in the barn.
And you had to build a fire to...
Yeah, build a fire. I had a furnace in the barn made out of brick, and it had these pipe, about this large around running around in the barn, and then the smokestack. So you had to fire it in the pipe. The heat all went around like this and then went out the top. And that's the way you had to, it took 5 to 6 days to cure 1 barn of tobacco.
How did the children make money?
Okay, our dad would give us a brood sow, 1 sow.
A what?
And,
Brood sow?
sow.
Oh, a pig.
A pig, yeah. And we had to take care of that particular one along with the rest, you see. But he would give us the pigs that we raised off of this 1 sow, 1 litter of them, to sell. It would amount to about, back then about $30 per hog, per sow, see? And that's the money we had to spend during the year. And also he would...
the whole year?
Yeah.
You made money off of 1 pig and used it the whole year?
Yeah. Plus we had, he would give us on Saturday, he'd give us 25 cents a wagon load of straw, to haul straw and put in this cow barn that I was telling you about where we had pinned these cows up.
Each of you got 25 cents, or all of you, and then you had to split
Well,
it up?
20, yeah, we had to split it up.
25 cents per load.
Yeah, there's
split.
3. There was 3 of us that was doing it. Roy, Bernice, and myself, and we had to split up about 25 cents, but we'd get as many as 30 loads a day. And that was $1 and maybe a couple of dollars a piece. That was a lot of money back then. I used to walk from home to a neighbor's farm, when I didn't have to work at home, and work for 50 cents a day.
Doing what?
Well, working on the farm, like planting potatoes or digging potatoes, anything he had to do on the farm.
What was his name?
Malsby, Henry Malsby.
So what What did you do with your money once you made it?
No, there was nothing to do back then but buy a Pepsi for a nickel.
Did you go to the movies?
Yeah, once in a while with silent movies.
Like, what
First.
did you like? What movies did you like?
Well, I think back then Tom Mix and several of those Western, that's about all you'd see back then was Westerns.
Really?
And most of them were silent.
What about Abbott and Costello?
Yeah, I see them are running all over everywhere and slapping each other down.
What about your clothes? Did you have to buy them?
Most of the time we would, buy some of our clothes.
With your money?
Yeah,
That you made?
yeah, but you know, you could buy a pair of pants or shirt for $1.50.
Really?
And during Christmas time, we'd load this wagon. Like today, if we was going to Wilmington tomorrow morning, leave tomorrow morning before day, with potatoes and eggs and chickens, and kill 2 or 3 hogs and take it over and sell it. And that's what we went and bought our Christmas, gifts and oranges and fruits and candies and stuff like that.
You take this stuff to
Drive the
Wilmington
mule 20 miles.
and sell it and split the money and buy Christmas presents?
Yeah.
What did Santa
And
Claus?
buy flour. About the only thing we had to buy back then, was flour and coffee and sugar.
Where did your other food come from? You raised it all?
Or the what?
Did you raise all your other food?
Oh, most of it, yeah.
Like butter?
Meat, all the meat. Butter, had a cow and milked a cow. Most of the time, 2 or 3 cows. Made on butter. Had the milk. Most of what we had to buy, like I said, was sugar and coffee. And then we bought the coffee and whole grain and had this turning thing. You've seen one of these cranking, like you chop meat with?
Mm-hmm.
You'd parch the coffee in the oven and put it in that and grind it.
The whole beans?
Yeah, coffee beans.
Mhm.
You've seen coffee beans, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about cheese? Did you have any cheese?
No, didn't know what cheese was.
What about your fruits? Did you grow those?
Oh yeah, we raised a lot of fruit back then. There wasn't bugs and things wasn't around to bother it like it was later on. Had a lot of fruit, peaches and pears and apples,
Did you go
and
hunting?
had a lot of wild blackberries. We'd pick blackberries and make blackberry dumpling. Mama would, and make jelly. And I remember even when they used to cook possum and eat it. Possums and coons.
Did you go bear hunting?
We'd take a possum though and shut him up, for a couple of weeks before we'd kill him.
Why?
'Cause they eat everything in the world that they could find. Dead snakes and everything else.
Yeah. Would they taste bad?
No, they was real good
No,
after you.
after they ate a snake, would they taste bad?
Well, I guess they would if you killed him then.
Did you go hunting?
Oh yeah, hunted a lot. Yeah, killed deer. Some bear, not many bear back then, but killed a lot of deer.
Did you eat bear?
Yeah, eat
Kill
bear. Yeah, I had bear a couple of years ago.
Really?
Yeah,
So,
I'm gonna try to go down and get one this year. If I do, I'm gonna bring you some back and cook it for you.
okay.
About the only thing we didn't eat back then was skunk, polecat,
Cool. Okay.
Try not to talk.
and foxes. We wouldn't eat a fox, or foxes, smell like a dog. They're in the dog family anyway.
Did you eat snake?
No, never eat no. A lot of people used to eat rattlesnake, but I never did eat any.
So would Santa Claus come visit you at Christmas?
Oh yeah, he'd come down the chimney.
What would he
Most of the time it'd be my dad up on top of the house, shaking a stick down, and the set was falling down the chimney. Make us think Santa Claus was coming down the chimney.
So what would you do?
Well, we'd be excited about it,
Well, wouldn't you have to go to bed or something? Santa Claus would-
A lot of times they'd make us go to bed early, you know, and then put out all the stuff and then call us up. Tell us Santa Claus was on top of the house.
What would you get?
Oh, mostly something to eat. And maybe a pair of socks, a couple of pair of socks, a shirt or something like that. Used to have these raisins I loved so well on bunches, you know, stems like a bunch of grapes. Well, that's what they are, I guess. Grapes dried up. But you don't see any more of them now. But they was real good. Had the seed in them and everything.
Raisins on a stem?
Yeah.
So,
And after I left the farm in 1935, no, maybe I was left before then, about 2 years before then. I worked on construction jobs at different places. One place that you'd like to go there. The oldest town in North Carolina, Bath. You ever been there?
no.
Helped build a road from Bath to Belhaven. And went to church in the oldest church there was in North Carolina, that's that.
How old were you?
Well, I was 22. 20, no, then I was only 20. That was about 2 years before I went to CC camp. Wasn't very much money around then.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go to school?
Bolivia, high school.
How did you get to school?
Well, now, wait a minute. All my grade school, I went out to where Mount Olive Church is, walked 3 miles each way. Leave home of a morning, you know, and it was nice and pretty and like winter time. And that evening when you got ready to come home, it was pouring down rain. You had to walk home in the rain all the way back.
How'd you, huh?
Didn't carry an umbrella or anything.
Did you take your lunch with you?
Yeah, take lunch with us.
Your high school, how'd you get to the high school?
Had a bus just like you do now.
Had a bus?
School buses.
When did your family get its first car?
A 1921 Model T. We was, I think, about the second person in that whole neighborhood. This Malsby guy had a car that I was telling you about. And I think we was the next family in that neighborhood anywhere, and you know, near anybody else that had an automobile. Had to get out and crank it like that. Didn't have no starter on it. And I remember one morning, it was have to jack up the wheel to get the thing turning when it was real cold. And the thing kicked back one morning. My brother Bernice was trying to crank it, and it flew back and broke his arm. He could just bend his arm like that where he broke it. The crank hit him on the arm.
Where'd you take the car? To church?
Yeah, I started driving the car to church. And my dad was a preacher, you know, and he'd drive it to church. Before that, before they got the car, he drove a mule, horse and buggy, as much as 20 miles to church. He'd leave on a Friday afternoon and spend a night with some of the church people. And back then they had their conference on Saturday. You know, they have it on Sunday now. But they wouldn't think about having any business in the church on Sunday back then. They had their conference on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock and then had the preaching service after 11. Well, had a service on Saturday and then another one on Sunday. And he'd drive back home right after Sunday service on that mule and buggy and get in about 8 or 9 o'clock that night. And then after he got the car, then he didn't have to leave, so he'd leave on a Saturday morning, you know.
How fast did those cars go?
Oh, about 20 miles an hour. And they had what they call magneto lights. Whenever you slowed down, you couldn't see the road hardly because the lights went down as the motor slowed down, say. There wasn't a constant light.
Did Uncle Joe ever talk about the Civil War to you?
Yeah, he did, but I don't remember what he said, Charles. It's been so long, I know he was a common dad over at Fort Cattle. And that's about all that I remember hearing him talk about.
Do you know where your mother and father were born?
My father was born in the vicinity of Supply or Whiteville. And my mother was born at Bolivia there. Her parents stayed out south of 17 and what they call the Val Evington area, where Val Evington used to stay. And her mother was a Flowers, I know that, Julianne Flowers.
Well, which house were you born in?
I was born in the old house that was torn down.
But it's not there anymore?
We moved there. We moved out of that old, no, it's not there anymore. We moved out of that house when I was 4 years old, but I remember when we moved. Didn't have any windows. I mean, it had windows, but no glasses in. It had wood shutters to the windows and all. Didn't have no glass windows.
How big was it?
Oh, had to be a big house for raise 10 kids in. 5 or 6 rooms, but it was just a big flat house, no upstairs or anything. You had to build up a big smoke in the afternoon to run the mosquitoes away, because in the summertime, if you open them windows, they'd eat you up. Didn't have any screen to the windows or nothing.
Your father, did he have a church that he preached at, or he?
Yeah, had 2. Well, he had a church every weekend. Yeah, Charlotte, Leland.
Different places?
Yeah, Longwood. You know where Longwood is between Charlotte and Whiteville? I think that was about the farthest one away. And Charlotte Village and Oak Grove, that was down in the vicinity of Holdings Beach. Yeah, he had a different church every weekend. He wasn't one continuous, like you do now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a different church. In other words, they only had church at these churches. They have Sunday school, but church once a month. That's the only time unless they had a revival meeting. That lasted 10 days. It didn't last 5 days like it does now. It'd go through 2 weekends. It would start on a Friday and go through till the next Monday or Tuesday.
You said that a group of you would go over to this place when it flooded out and swim over there?
Oh, yeah. That was going through from, on the old Georgetown Road when they had a lot of water. We'd just go down there and swim right in the road. They got bridges there now. Back then they had foot logs made, to walk across when the water got high. But we'd just go down there and swim in the road. It would be as much as 100 yards of water in that place. I remember Uncle Willie used to come out from Wilmington, on a Sunday morning, and we'd have one of these pour down floods while he was out there, and it'd be a couple of days before he could get out of there to get back to Wilmington. He was driving a Model T too. If you run a Model T through water like that, that was it. It would drown it out. We usually had a turkey on Thanksgiving. Most of the time my dad or my oldest brother, Lindsay, would go out and kill a wild one. Plenty of wild turkey down there then. I seen Papa come back home one day with 7. They killed it on one trip. Well, the fact of the matter was, we saw them cross the road. Down from where the old house is to where we used to live. And he got the gun and went down through the wooded area down to the old field where they was going down there to eat peanuts. We had plenty of peanuts back then.
Turkeys eat peanuts?
Yeah, man, they love peanuts. And he slipped down through the woods down there.
You said your daddy built that house that you lived in?
Yeah, he built the one that we moved in from the old house. Him and the neighbors, and people would come in and help each other on house buildings and house movings, and I don't know where you remember the old kitchen. It was back of that old house at one time.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, we moved that thing from way up in the west end of that field. Slid it on pine poles, cut 4 poles and peeled them, and jacked it up and put 2 under it. And then put 2 in front of that. When we pulled it up on them 2, we'd take the 2 back ones and put them in front. Yeah. And just keep switching them like that. And moved it on 4 poles. Had a mule that Mr. Henry mauled behind. Great big old mule, and we put her in the front of it, and then we'd get to the back with poles, you know, and do like that, prise it and make it start sliding.
You were talking about the how they dug wells back then? And,
yeah.
How they dug them by hand?
Yeah, sure. They had a windlass with a rope. It was a homemade thing with just a piece of wood, gum wood, and they put it in a fork like this over here and over the well. It had a handle on it. And the rope on that the middle of that windlass, where you let the bucket up and down with, you'd let it down and you'd fill it up with mud, and had one on the other end of the rope. When you pull this one up, the other one went down. And you'd dump this one out, and he'd have the other one filled up. And you'd let that one back down, and he'd have that one ready. I had the rope fixed so it would do that, so one would go down and one would come up. And they did all that by hand, too. I mean, the guy down in the well just had a shovel or maybe a pick of some kind to dig up the dirt with. Take about two or 3 days to dig one. Be about 4 or 5 feet in diameter. About 5 feet. And along at the latter part of that, they made curbs, well curbs out of cypress timber, and put down in there to keep the dirt from falling in on them and filling the well up. Before that, that dirt would fall in every once in a while, you know, and they'd have to go back down and clean it all out again.
Did Joe go to church at all?
Yeah, I remember when he used to drive the mule and cart out to where the old where the cemetery is now. Yeah. Have a revival meeting. And it was always in September when grapes was ripe, and Lordy, they had a lot of grapes. And I look forward to that because they go out there, you see, and when we had a meeting in the morning. Don't do like they do now. They'd have services of the morning at 11 o'clock, and people go back home. We visit each other, you know. Didn't work a bit that week. I don't care what was coming up. Very little work, just something I had to do. And I'd always go home with them so I could eat grapes. I love grapes. Yeah, I remember him going to church. Aunt Babe and some of the boys.
Was your daddy a singer?
Oh yeah, he could sing real good. I guess that's where Lynch and A.W. and his boys got their singing from.
Did they have pianos in the church or anything?
Had organs.
No.
Not when I first started church, they didn't. But later on they did.
When y'all were talking about this polecat oil that you put on felt and your mother tied it around your neck to keep colds away or something?
Yeah. We'd catch these polecats and skin them, sell the hide, had fur on it, and we'd take that grease. I never seen a poor I mean, poor, you know, without grease on him. Never seen a polecat that didn't have a lot of grease on him. And we'd take that off of there, and Mom would cook it out in an old pot, and it would turn to tallow. You know, like beef tallow. And she'd put it in they call it a polis. It was made out of 3 or 4 thicknesses of the cloth, and she put it in that and put it around the neck. And well, she put spare turpentine in it too. And then she'd give you, if you got a cold or anything, a little cold, she'd give you a teaspoonful of turpentine twice a day. Spirit of turpentine. Yeah, and that would get you too.
Did that keep the colds away?
Yeah. We didn't know what a doctor was back there. I think I remember Dr. Goley coming to our house maybe 1 or 2 different times. They had an epidemic of the flu, you know, in 1917. And there's a lot of people died because they didn't know what to do with it, you know.
Well, how did you were talking about storing the sausage in lard. How did you store the food?
We stuffed it, had a sausage mill, grind it up by hand, and then we'd put it back in that same mill, but we'd take the cutters out and made this funnel thing out of a gourd and put on the end of it, and we'd put that casing on that. It stuck out about this long. We'd slide it on there till we got it full, and then we'd start turning that handle, and somebody would pack the meat in the mill, the grinder, and it would run that thing full, stuff it full of sausage. We'd hang it up for 4 or 5 days in the sunshine, and when it got kind of dry, we'd take it down and cut it the length of a jar and put it down in there till we got that jar full, and then we'd pour it full of lard, put the lid on it. When you wanted to cook any, you'd just open that and pull one of them pieces of sausage out, or whatever amount you wanted to cook. Seal it back up. It would keep in there the whole year.
So it was in jars, not buckets? You had it in jars, not buckets?
Well, we put some in lard stands, regular lard stands, 50-pound lard stands. If you had a lot of it, we'd just roll it around in a ring. You know, it would be in strings about this long or longer. We'd roll it around in that can like that till we got the thing full and pour it full of lard. And it would keep just like the other did. But now if you kept it in that open where it got air to it, it would rust quicker than the other would.
Yeah.
And the jar would keep a whole year. But the one in the can, we always eat that first if we put it in a can. And we used to pickle meat. Side, the middling of a hog. We'd put that in a barrel, just like I was telling you, a wooden barrel. Just like I was telling you, we did the sausage. We'd stand it up around in there till we got that thing full, on up as full as you wanted it. And then we'd put 2 sticks across the top of it so it wouldn't float. A barrel was made like that, like a woman. And up at the top, you see, you could cut a couple of sticks and cross them in there, and it couldn't push them out because it was getting smaller. And we'd make pickle out of salt. We'd put this water in the tub, warm water, not real hot one, but warm enough to melt the salt. And we'd keep adding salt in there. Put an egg in it, a hen egg, and we'd keep adding salt in there. When that egg floated, it was salt. It was salt enough. You know, you put an egg in plain water and it'll go to the bottom. But you put enough of salt in there and it comes to the top. And that's the way we knew how much salt when we had enough of salt in the water. And we'd pour it in, that's what they call pickle, salt pickle. And they'd pour it in this wooden barrel, in that, cover that meat up completely with it. And that would keep a whole year too, and that was good eating with vegetables.
You said your father had everybody organized. They had their own jobs assigned, and there were how many children?
Like when there's killing hogs or something?
Yeah, you said one time you killed 15 hogs at one time?
Oh yeah, we'd kill, maybe before Christmas we'd kill 5 or 6, and then after Christmas when the weather got colder we'd kill the rest of them. We have killed as many as 15 to 16 a year. And each person knew what to do. I mean, the neighbors came in and helped you. And then when they killed theirs, we'd go help them and always give them a piece of a backbone or sausage or something for helping us, and then they'd do the same thing. Back then, neighbors helped neighbors. They didn't charge you for every minute they did.
What did you do when you killed 15 hogs? What'd you do with that much?
We'd cure it, just like I was telling you about, in the barrel, and then we'd salt the other down, and it stayed for 6 weeks. Take it up and wash it. Salt it down for another 2 weeks. Wash that off, hang it up and smoke it. Smoked it with sweet bay wood and hickory wood. In the smokehouse. The smokehouse was made without a floor in it, dirt, natural dirt. Had a big hole dug in the middle of it. That's where we'd build up this fire. When it got to burning, then we'd smother it down with this green wood so it would make a smoke and not a blaze. I smoked some up here after I came up here. I had it out in the back building behind the house, and had a big, I guess it was a wash tub. No, I believe it was old polyhide. And I had that thing smoking up a storm there one day, and this guy run in from the highway, come in, pulled in the yard, and hollered and called me and said, "Man, your building's on fire." I said, "No, I want to show you what I'm doing." I said, "I'm smoking meat." I said, "The building's not on fire." He'd never seen that before. But it made it a good taste to it with that smoke on it. And after you got it smoked, then you'd make a paste out of borax and black pepper and just rub it all over that and put it in bags and hang it up. It would stay right there.
Kept the flies off?
Keep the flies off of it too, yeah.
Otherwise they would lay their eggs on it, wouldn't they?
They wouldn't, very seldom any flies ever got in it. You would, a 2-year-old ham would cost you more than a 1-year one would. Papa used to sell a lot of our hams out to this cafe. This man, the only cafe I knew of around anywhere. His name was Long. And he would sell him some of the hams to cook out there for people.
He made shoes for the children?
Yeah, he'd make shoes. He had all these cobbler tools to make shoes out of with. And he would tan the own leather that was made out of. Cowhides and deerskins and stuff. He used the deerskins mostly for strings to go in them, The thicker leather he would get from cows. And he tanned it in a tanning vat with red oak bark and some other stuff he put in it. I don't know what it was. I don't remember now, but it was just like leather you'd go and buy out of the store somewhere.
What did you do for socks? Did your mother make socks?
Yeah, she knitted socks. I remember her knitting socks, yeah. Had this twine, I guess, is about the same thing you get now, you know, to knit stuff out of. And make sweaters too.
How'd you have time to do all that? You must have worked all day long.
Back then they had plenty of time. We kept the milk in the well, down in the well on a rope in the water so it would stay cool. We had 2 or 3 cows and we drank a lot of milk and eat a lot of butter. We made our own butter. And we make our drinking dippers out of coconut hulls or gourd. A gourd already had a handle on it, you know, and if you made it out of a coconut shell, you had to put the handle on it. It was just take a wooden handle and probably put a screw in it or something, or, well, I believe you bored a hole and run it all the way through to the other side and use that for a dipper. Had wooden buckets back then made out of wood and wooden tubs. You didn't know what a galvanized bucket or a galvanized tub was. No, I didn't like the sheep shearing. It was too nasty and messy. Take too long. You had to do it by hand with a pair of shears. And you'd nip the skin on the old sheep and he'd holler.
How'd you keep
But
them still?
it'd take 3 or 4 days to shear them because we had about 75 or 80.
What'd you do with all the wool?
Sell it. The wool would bring more than the sheep would. You see, you had to shear them every spring. You didn't shear them no time except in May or June. You leave that wool on them through the winter time, see, so they wouldn't freeze. We'd drive them up in the spring of the year and put them in this big pen we had. And keep them up there till we got them all sheared and then turn them loose. They'd go back in the woods. And they was never penned no more until the next spring. They had a large wooded area we kept them in. They lived on their own. Very seldom ever had to feed them. They got a lot of stuff down out of this wooded area that grows down close to the ground. Like, I believe they call it starweed. Yeah. Stargrass. And they love that, and there's a lot of it down there.
You said when you got the skunk smell that you had to bury your clothes in the dirt?
Yeah, if you went out and got this stuff on your clothes, you'd have to bury them in the ground for about 4 or 5 days. And it would leave your clothes. You couldn't wash it out, no way. Mom used to make lye soap. You know, that's mostly what we used. You didn't use it on your face, but for washing clothes and things. Made out of lye and fat meat, like would come off of meat that you'd been cooking, skinned and stuff. Made it out of that, and in this big pot, put it in and boil it till it all come to, and then you just cut this soap out in big cakes, however big you wanted, and lay it on a board out in the smokehouse where the meat was, and you'd go out and get it when you wanted it.
So you never really went hungry? Never really wanted anything?
Never went lacking for anything to eat, no. Not our family, and not many other families down there that I know of. Even black people. We had 4 or 5 families of black people near there that worked with us, like stripping fodder or digging potatoes or harvesting corn. And they would even come and help us kill hogs too, and they never went hungry as far as I know. Never.
After you got out of high school and then you went to work on the construction, and
Yeah.
then, is that when the Depression came along?
Yeah.
Well, how was the Depression for you? I mean, you had-
Well, I got by pretty well. What they did, they would hire a person, you know, for 3 days. And then you had to lay off 3 days and let somebody else work 3 days because they had more people to work than they had work for them to do. But I bought a truck, you know, like a dump truck to haul the gravel and dirt with. And I could run my truck 6 days a week, but I couldn't drive it but 3. So I hired a nephew, not a nephew, a first cousin of mine, to drive it the other 3 days, see?
Who was that?
William Clemmons. That was one of Uncle Joe's boys.
So you had a dump truck?
Yeah, I bought a dump truck, and I kept it for, I don't know, a couple of years before when I went to CC, I sold it to another guy. I still owned it when I went and joined the CC camp.
So while you were doing construction, the Depression was then too?
Based on one.
No. The Depression was while you were doing
Yeah.
construction work?
Yeah, that's the reason you couldn't work but 3 days a week, see. One person would work 3 days, and he had to lay off and let another person work 3. They had what they call a WPA, and then the CCC came on, which helped a lot of boys. You know, a lot of them were those, they just went there to be there. They didn't try to make anything out of themselves. They just went there to be there, that's all. But it did a lot of the boys good. I mean, you know, anybody that wanted to do something for themselves ordinarily can do it if they try hard enough, you know. The 12th of January in 1935, I enlisted, and the next day they sent me to Morehead City on a train. There was about 75 of us. There was 100, I think, in that group. We went to the custom house in Wilmington and signed up everything. Sent us out to the cafe, to the restaurant, and fed us and put us on the train. And that was like 8 o'clock this morning, and it was 8 that night before we got there, only about 70 miles. That's all the fast the train was back then. Some of the boys talked about let's get out and push him up the other hill over there. And when we got down there, all this 3 or 4 big covered trucks was there, you know, waiting to take us over to the barracks. The barracks was over at Fort Macon. And they took us over there and unloaded us. Had supper for us. But they kept us in. They keep all the new enrollees in camp for 5 days before they put them out to work. You know, examining them and all, and checking the health problems and things like that. Let them, you know, more or less clean up around the campsite before they'd put them out on any kind of heavy work.
So what did you do at Fort Macon?
Work the old fort. I was on the crew that did that. Some of the other boys would landscaping the beach of this grass, you know, sea oats and stuff like that. And what we did mostly on the fort was rebuilt the inside of it down where they kept the prisoners when it was in operation. Redid that, and the steps and all that goes down to it.
What was Fort Macon like when you went there?
Oh, it was like a hog pen or something that hadn't been used for years.
Sounds pretty bad.
And so you fixed it up?
Yeah.
What, you found some coins on the beach?
Yeah, I found some.
How'd you find
Found
them?
several of them. We'd go out where the barracks was, you know, when the army was there. And the wind would blow the sand off. Back then, there was nothing on the beach, you know. There was no homes on the beach or anything, just big wavy hills like that. And you'd find this valley place, that's where they put the camps. And, well, that's where our camp was, too, in one of those areas. But ours was closer down to the beach. And the wind blew down, and you'd go out after a windy day and just pick up all kind of coins and metal pieces and stuff like that. Like the piece I gave you, Dad, a 3-cent piece, and a dime. It was made in 1832, and I had a lot of those large pennies, you know. Did you ever see one of the large pennies? Looked like a 50-cent piece. But I don't know what happened to them. They wasn't in the container when I found this other stuff. I don't know what happened to them. I had 5 or 6 of them, I know.
What else else would you do in the CCC, like when you weren't working?
When I wasn't working,
Mhm.
walk the beach and pick up shells, seashells and things like that. On Sunday, walk to town and go to the show. They'd carry us to town, you know, on the trucks, but if you wasn't there when the truck got ready to go, you had to walk back, which was 7 miles back there, and we did it a lot of times, we boys. We'd get off somewhere or another and miss the truck. Have to walk all the way back.
Well, how did you meet Mother?
Met her on this, it was a battleship Raleigh. We were stationed in the harbor there at Southport. Take people across in these boats and visit that, show them what was going on and all. That's the first, one of the first ships, battleship that ever had a, you know, a plane on the deck. Like you shoot it off like that.
A carrier? Aircraft carrier?
Well, it wasn't an aircraft carrier, but it had this plane on there, a real, very small plane. And I met her on that boat, on that ship.
You asked her for a date that same day?
Well, yeah, I asked her to come out when we started to leave. I asked her if she wanted to go to my uncle's with me, which lived in Southport. She said, yeah. And some of them was going to school at Southport in Burnham. Knew them already. So she wasn't in no strange place when she went to my uncle's, because there's 3 or 4 of the girls over there that was going to school with her.
You just saw her and asked her for a date?
Yeah, but then she wanted to know when I was going to take her to the beach and look for turtle eggs. On full moon in May, you know, that's when these big turtles come up. And sure enough, when it came on, we got 2 or 3 other couples together and went over and looked for turtle eggs all night long.
Where else did you go on dates?
Oh, back then, you know, weenie roasters and things like that. We'd go down to the inland waterway where there's just started building that. And wood sawings. Used to go to wood sawings and peanut shellings and corn shuckings. And
Talk about the corn shuck.
it had a, not everybody did this now, but these guys, you know, that like they're toddy every once in a while, they'd take a gallon of white lightning whiskey and put it in this big pile and cover it up with this big pile of corn. And the first one got to it, that was got the first drink out of it. And they also had red ears of corn in there. The first one found the red ear of corn got to kiss his girlfriend.
What about the corn, the wood carvings? What were
Wood splittings, wood sawings. They saw the wood up with this old crosscut saw. One guy on one end and one on the other end, but the girl had to pull one end and you pull the other. Sawing for her, say, you'd go to different people's homes. And then take the axe and split it up. Pine wood, you know, about like this, the cook stove, using a cook stove. Yeah, they shell these peanuts for people to plant, you know. Had a lot of, well, shoe boxes most back then. All shoes came in boxes and they'd shell peanuts. And the one that shelled the most peanuts they had a candy pulling too, you know. Homemade candy. And the one that shelled the most peanuts got to pull candy with his girlfriend, say.
What happens then?
Well, they eat the candy. They'd have a little music after the candy pulling and the peanut shelling, and dance a little bit, square dance.
Did you go to square
Like I say, not everybody did that, though. Just maybe a few people here and there. Oh, yeah, I used to go to square dances. Verna left a square dance and go to the movies. Everything, go hunting. Used to take her hunting with us.
When you went to school, what did you study in school?
What did I study? Well, the last 2 years I studied French, but I didn't learn too much about it. It was one of the subjects, French, and high school was, you know, history and geography and stuff like that, spelling, arithmetic.
Did you play in any sports?
Yeah, I played basketball both years when I was in high school.
Did you play on the high school team?
Yeah,
You did?
yeah. Pretty good, if I say so myself.
I think you just did.
Well, like I say, I'd never been fat, you know. I've always been skinny, and I could jump higher than most of them could.
Mm-hmm.
When I left Morehead City, I went to Laurinburg. I got to be a leader at Laurinburg. I was assistant leader before I left Morehead. And I got to be a leader at Laurinburg. In fact, I was in charge of the whole camp up there. Road, and because it was a side camp, we only had 50 people there. And then we did what work was supposed to be done up there, finished up a job at another camp had left and sent me to White Lake. And this friend of mine that was a foreman up there, when I came to White Lake, he talked to him and wanted to know if there's any particular job I wanted to do down there. And I said, I'll do anything you want me to do. But he gave me the tool room, supply sergeant in a tool room. And then they came up with this. There was 2 positions that came out as call it semi-skilled foreman. And I got one of them. I was the first one to get, and then Red Ellis got that one. I was out of the CC then. And they sent me up here to the side camp to operate the nursery. Just a very small nursery at that time, only about, maybe 100,000 seedlings a year. Did it all by hand, didn't have any machine or anything. Reason I got the job that I did, it was called at that time nurseryman. Mr. Holmes, J.S. Holmes, he was the first state forester of North Carolina. He was an Englishman. He seemed to think a lot of me. And he asked me if I'd like to have a job as a nurseryman. I told him, yeah. And that was in July of 1938. And then in September we moved up here after I got the house all straightened out and cleaned up.
When did you buy the farm up here?
1943.
How many acres was it in the beginning?
335.
Do you remember how much it cost?
Do I remember what?
How much it cost?
Yeah, but I don't think I'll tell you. Yeah, I don't mind telling you. $8,000. 335 acres, $8,000.
You know who's in this picture?
Where'd you get that?
I found it in the negatives.
Wow, that's an old one. Yeah, I know who it is. That's my dad, and that's Lindsay, and that's me. And this here's old Mary. Mary the mule. That's the same mule now that my dad was going to Bolivia. And he was driving this mule and cart, that same cart, I guess. And down below the house there was a path that had turned off for going back to the back field. And he wasn't paying any attention to what the mule was doing, you know, and just what they call trotting along. And when she got to that pasture, all of a sudden she just turned in there and throwed him over the cart. He wasn't holding on and throwed him over the cart, and he took pneumonia from there. Now, I don't know how many years after that this was. I mean, after this that was, but that's what happened. That same mule. And they took him to the hospital, and he had pneumonia. And back then, there wasn't nothing.
No penicillin in those days.
What kind of car was that? Is that a Chevrolet?
Yeah,
What years?
38 Chevrolet. White wall tires, but I painted them. I wanted white wall tires on it, so I got white paint and painted them.
Did it stay on?
It didn't take long, but I'd paint them every week. Yeah, I bought that car new. What do you think I paid for that car?
$200?
50 cents.
No, it was a little more than that.
800.
$600.
Yeah. That was a lot of money for those.
I kept it a year and went and traded it in and got a 39 model.
You remember anything about the First World War?
Yeah, I remember when it ended. I don't remember when it started. It ended in 1918. We was when we got the word that it had ended, we was in the tobacco field. That was our first tobacco planting. First year planting tobacco. And I was I was 8 years old because I was born in 1910. I was 8 years old. But I was big enough then to work. I'd do as much work then as a 20-year-old person would.
How'd you find out? Somebody come and tell you?
Well, somebody came and told us because there was no television, then, or telephone. At that particular time, there wasn't a telephone in Brunswick County that I knew about. Later on, there was one at Bolivia. You could go there and call to, different places.
Who owned
Just
that?
one man down there had a telephone in his store, and you could go there and call places that you wanted to.
Yeah, most of them were put in during the Depression, I guess, or right after the Depression.
Yeah. But see, Stella's husband was in there, Lyndon. He was in the World War I. And I guess that's the reason we got the message so early. I mean, as well as we did.
What do you remember about the Second World War?
Well, I was up here at the Second World War, in 1941, 7th of December.
You weren't drafted during the war.
No. I was exempted on account of the type of work that I was doing. At that time, I was in, working with fire control and nursery and everything. And that kept me out, kept from being drafted. And also, I was doing farming on the side. Like I bought this farm in 43, during the time the war was on. And that kept me out too.
Did you think you were going to get drafted?
Yeah. If it had lasted another 6 months, I'd have been drafted too, yeah. Because it was getting down to the last ones,
Yeah.
And two, I had a family, see. Jean was 39. John was born in 41. And, that helped out some too, keep from being drafted. Cigarettes was rationed, and at that time I did smoke cigarettes, and I didn't have any problem getting cigarettes.
Do you have any trouble getting gas?
Oh yeah, had gas stamps. You had to have a special permit to buy tires, buy automobile tires. And you had gas was rationed, meat was rationed, and sugar, coffee, flour.
Why'd you quit smoking?
Well, I thought it was foolish to burn up 15 cents, 30 cents a day. Back then, the cigarettes weren't but 15 cents a pack, and smoked 2 packs a day. And I was down in the office one morning, went down to go to work, and the boys all standing around the heater, and I smoked a cigarette. I remember what it was, old Winston. And that was the last one I had in that pack, and I said, that's foolish. Go around here and burn up 30 cents a day when I won't make them but about maybe $2 or $3 a day. And I threw the pack in the heater, and that's the last one I ever smoked. The boys told me, said, I bet anything you got, if you want to bet, that you'll be smoking another one in 3 days.
you didn't?
Never had a habit I couldn't quit anything.
Do you know who decided to name the state forest after you?
Well, to begin with, Charlotte Johnson, the girl that works in my office. She's the one that talked to Ralph Winkworth about it. See, I didn't know anything about it till it was all over with. And, of course, he was one of the best friends I ever had.
What position was he in?
He was the head of the whole outfit.
The state forestry?
Yeah.
So how'd you feel when you found out that they were going to name the forest after you?
Well, what they did at the party, you see, my retirement party, they brought it up then. In the meantime, they had come out and took the sign down, Clayton State Forest, and put my name up there.
What's the most memorable experience of your life?
I guess it was that naming that forest after me.